I think the most important thing for India is that it lost the global narrative war with Pakistan. It did not get buy-in and support from the international community throughout the conflict. It didn't get the international community to agree to India's position that it was waging these actions as part of a counterterrorism imperative. It did not get that.
It seems that Afghanistan, the Taliban, they have found a new partner in the region in the shape of India. If we look at some previous visits, Afghanistan's foreign minister, the Taliban's foreign minister Amir Khan Muttaqi, he traveled to India. Then their trade and health minister also toured India. Why do you think India is engaging with the Taliban?
Taliban health minister, the third Taliban minister over the last month or so. It's pretty significant. There's several factors. One is that India knows that it has historically had a significant influence in Afghanistan.
There's frequent pressure of the US on India regarding tariffs. At the same time, the Russian president, he travels to India. How do you think India will manage relations with the US given its closeness with Russia as well?
The Trump administration is working very hard to start a peace process that Russia buys into in Ukraine. The administration, of course, is taking a very hard line on those countries that do business with Russia, which, of course, includes chief among them India. So I think there's unhappiness there in Washington because of that. I would argue that one could argue that the White House would have been happy about the visit because it would have given Modi an opportunity to deliver a message to Putin that the US does not want India to do with Russia, and that's do business with it.
We see US congressmen put resolutions out against Field Marshal Asim Munir, banning him from foreign travel and put sanctions on him. Do you think, given the warmth in relation between Trump and Field Marshal here, is there any impact of those resolutions on Pakistan's military chief?
Just because you have this legislation calling for the Pakistani military to be sanctioned or whatever, that does not mean that it's going to happen. And I do think that given the nature of the relationship between the two, and given that the White House has taken this very positive position for now, and given that the White House has really been driving the policy toward Pakistan, I don't think that we're going to see much effect. And yes, I mean, a number of Republicans, including Trump, Republicans close to Trump have signed on to some of this legislation. But I think we've seen a pattern that, even those on the Capitol Hill that are pro-Trump, that are Republicans, they're very careful. They don't try to push him and his White House to do certain things because, this is sort of the political moment in Washington now. You have to be careful.
Hello and welcome. This is WNN Podcast and I'm your host Raja Zarion. Today we have a very prominent American foreign policy analyst specializing in South Asia, particularly India, Afghanistan and Pakistan. He is widely cited in global media outlets such as CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, Reuters, New York Times and The Washington Post. We have with us Michael Kugelman. Michael, thank you so much for your time. Let's begin with the questions. Michael, my first question to you is, there's a recent development in Afghanistan where over than 1,000 Afghan clerics, Taliban clerics, they gathered and they passed a resolution barring any Muslim from participating against any other country from their soil. How do you see this development?
Well, it's important in the sense that this was quite a few religious figures who presumably, in many cases, have significant levels of influence and could be said to represent broader views in Afghanistan. But the unfortunate thing is that these are not Taliban representatives that were part of these clerics. So that means that what they said did not represent necessarily the view of the Taliban. And what we've seen over the last few months, or really over the last few years, is a pattern of the Taliban being under pressure from Pakistan and also increasingly from international actors like Turkey and Qatar and Saudi Arabia and others to essentially pledge to deny space to anti-Pakistan militants on Afghan soil, but the Taliban has given no any indication that they're going to do that. So in that sense, I think that we need to maintain some skepticism, unfortunately. And while it's a good thing that you have this large number of clerics making this call, it does not represent, so far as I know, the Taliban and its view. And there's no reason to think, unfortunately, that the Taliban's calculus will change, even if you have this most recent case of of clerics putting out this very significant statement about the need to deny space to terrorists in Afghanistan.
All right, Michael, there's two dimensions to it. First of all, Taliban claim to be an Islamic system. Their supreme leader, Habatullah, he is also a cleric. And you don't see any connection between the cleric's resolution and the Taliban government. But in reality, the most interesting outcome of this resolution was that they barred every Muslim, not every Afghan, but every Muslim, be it the members of TTP, that those who carry out attacks against Pakistan using the Afghan territory. And don't you think that it is the recognition of Pakistan's stance that Afghan soil is being used against us? This resolution is a recognition of Pakistan's stance? Please.
I mean, I think it's quite clear that the TTP has had a significant presence in Afghanistan in recent years. I mean, it has a presence in Pakistan too. I mean, that's for sure. But it's very clear that it has a presence in Afghanistan, and the return of the Taliban to power in Afghanistan, I'm quite confident, has made it easier for the TTP to retain its presence in Afghanistan, given close ties between the Afghan Taliban and the Pakistan Taliban. But I think again that this is a position that Pakistan takes that I think has a lot of support from these external mediators like Qatar and Turkey and Saudi Arabia. China, of course, is also very concerned about this problem because China is really the only country other than Pakistan that's been targeted uh, by terrorists in Pakistan who are based in Afghanistan. But let's recall what the Taliban just did very recently. Very soon after these clerics made this call for Afghan soil not to be used for attacks on Pakistan, the Taliban indicated that it will not be participating in an incoming regional conference in Tehran
Mm.
focused on this issue. And that I think raises a lot of questions about how committed the Taliban really are to addressing this issue that Pakistan and so many regional players have expressed significant concerns about.
Right. Michael, you're a frequent commentator on South Asian politics and you know the regional dynamics as well. The trade halt, the border closure between Pakistan and Afghanistan, be it Chaman or Turkham, do you think that it played a role in this cleric's resolution and put pressure on Taliban?
I think it may have. I mean, it's very clear that halting trade isn't only about implications for the economy, but it also has very real impacts on common people, right? If you close the border, all these Afghans that would go into Pakistan to work, to see family, to go to school, and all that. I mean, this is impacted. So I think that certainly there's a lot of concern in Afghanistan about the implications that that could have for common people. Now, one could also argue that Pakistan, if it's looking for ways to use leverage, what leverage it has to try to get the Taliban to address this problem, that it could use trade and the borders as leverage. I mean, it's a harsh tactic because you're essentially playing with people's lives and you're doing things that could impact their economic security. But now that we've seen that the borders are essentially closed, trade is not happening, I have no reason to believe that we've seen the needle move forward, so to speak, in terms of the Taliban being more willing to act on these demands, which is very depressing and I think gets to the bigger problem. But you're right. I do think that so long as the borders remain closed, so long as the trade doesn't happen, so long as you continue to have these impacts on the lives of not only Afghans but Pakistanis, that we might see more pressure from wider civil society and from religious figures in Afghanistan. And we'll see how much that builds, but it'd be a very hard sell, unfortunately, given the Taliban's position.
Right. Michael, it seems that Afghanistan, the Taliban, they have found a new partner in the region in the shape of India. I mean, if we look at some previous visits, Afghanistan's foreign minister, the Taliban's foreign minister, Amir Khan Muttaqi, he traveled to India. Then their trade and health minister also toured India. Why do you think India is engaging with the Taliban, given its rhetoric of extremism and terrorism linked with Taliban? I mean, they frequently accused Taliban of extremism and terrorism, and now they are engaging with them. So, what's the reason behind it?
Right. Yeah. Taliban health minister, the third Taliban minister over the last, month or so. It's pretty significant. I think that the Indian government has been very pragmatic here. Indeed, I mean, they did see the Taliban as a hostile entity. I mean, the Taliban did attack Indian targets in Afghanistan during the war years, and of course, because of the Taliban's own relationship with Pakistan for many years, this made the Indians very concerned about the Taliban. But I think there's several factors. One is that that India knows that it has historically had a significant influence in Afghanistan. Traditionally, it's been a significant supplier of development assistance and humanitarian aid. I would argue that among the broader Afghan public, India's image is fairly positive, and I think India has wanted to continue that, to build on that. And in a sense, I think it's felt that it's important to engage with the Taliban, to have that level of connection, so that it's easier for India to be present in Afghanistan. I would also argue that India has concerns about the security situation in Afghanistan, including terrorism, particularly groups that it believes are based in Afghanistan and have previously targeted India in the past. And I think it feels that by having channels of communication with the Taliban, it's in a better position to convey those concerns to the Taliban. And now that the relationship has evolved with the Taliban enough that India has now fully reopened its embassy in Kabul, yeah, I think that means it's going to have an on-ground presence that'll put it in a better position to monitor these security threats. The final point I'll make here, I do think that the crisis between Pakistan and the Taliban has given India an opportunity, one that it's wanted to capitalize on. As you know, Afghanistan has long been a battleground for India-Pakistan competition. And I think that New Delhi feels that with Pakistan really on the defensive now, with its ties in deep tensions with the Taliban, that India has an opportunity to be on the front foot, so to speak. I don't think that we'd be seeing this level of engagement. We would not have seen the Taliban foreign minister in India for 1 week if you didn't have this deep crisis between Pakistan and the Taliban. I do think that even if relations between the Taliban and Pakistan were smooth, I still think India would have tried to engage with the Taliban. But I think neither the Taliban nor India would have felt as comfortable doing it. But I'll say this: India is really pushing on an open door with the Taliban. The Taliban clearly is done with Pakistan, in my view. I think they want to move on from Pakistan, and they know that they could help solidify their domestic legitimacy by strengthening ties with India, a country that, as I said, is quite popular in Afghanistan. So in that sense, the Taliban is a willing partner, even though we're not going to see any type of normalized formal relationship between India and the Taliban regime.
Right. Michael, let's move on to India. I want to understand this from you. The main driving factor behind India's foreign policy is economics. And we have seen in the recent past that there's frequent pressure of the US on India regarding tariffs. At the same time, the Russian president, he travels to India. They want to enhance cooperation in the energy and security domains. So, how do you think India will manage relations with the US given its closeness with Russia as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Trump administration would rather not have seen it, particularly in a moment when the Trump administration is working very hard to start a peace process that Russia buys into in Ukraine. The administration, of course, is taking a very hard line on those countries that do business with Russia, which, of course, includes chief among them India. So I think there's unhappiness there in Washington because of that. I would argue that one could argue that the White House would have been happy about the visit because it would have given Modi an opportunity to deliver a message to Putin that is the same message that the White House would like to deliver to Putin, and that's that you need to stop fighting the war. I mean, Modi, the Indian government, they oppose the war, and Modi has told this to the Russian government, including Putin, before. But I'm not sure if that's how the administration will see these things. I think that it is significant that the Putin visit came on the heels of India's decision to scale back its oil imports from Russia. Since new U.S. sanctions went into effect on Russian energy companies around November 21st or so, you
Hmm.
actually saw India's oil imports from Russia cut by about a third. So I think that's something that would ease the administration. Not only that, the India concluded a new gas deal with the U.S. In recent weeks, so that'll help. But if you look at the outcomes of the Putin-Modi summit, what did they decide to do? Well, I mean, yes, they agreed to continue to pursue energy cooperation, but I think what's more significant and problematic from a U.S. perspective, U.S. government perspective, is that they agreed to expand their commercial cooperation, focusing on a number of other things that haven't necessarily gotten as much focus, and that includes agricultural exports from India to Russia. India is trying to narrow the trade imbalance it has with Russia, but I think the Trump administration would see this as another way of India trying to bolster Putin at a moment when the U.S. is trying to get him to agree to a peace process, and essentially doing the very thing that the U.S. does not want India to do with Russia, and that's do business with it.
Right. Michael, how do you think the way the India is playing it? Apparently, they're opposing the war, but deep down, they're financing it. I mean, by buying Russian oil and cooperating with Russia. And you imply that maybe President Trump, he wanted to signal a message to Putin via India. But how come if President Trump, he himself could not stop Putin, how can India could?
No, and I think that's an important point. There have been a number, well, not a number, there have been several leaders who have tried to get Russia to agree to the idea that the war needs to be wrapped up. It hasn't been successful. I think Modi is particularly significant because of this very deep relationship between India and Russia, and also what seems to be a close personal relationship between Modi and Putin. But, on a number of occasions since the war began, uh, pardon me, Modi and other Indian officials have pushed the Russian government to rethink their war strategy, and they have not. All these calls on the Indian side for the war to end have failed. So I think that that is an important thing to acknowledge, but I think that Modi is more significant than most in this context, just because of the important relationship that India has with Russia, and also the fact that India does have a pretty good relationship with Ukraine, and there are indications that there could be a high-level visit, perhaps by involving Modi meeting Zelensky in the coming weeks. So there's that as well. But I think ultimately, if there's anyone that could get Putin to agree to a peace process, it would be Trump, and it would be the U.S. Though I'm not even saying that that would be successful, but Trump has a certain level of he's got something I think that no other figure does. I mean, he's the president of the United States. Not to, and also to keep in mind that Trump himself has professed his admiration Putin in the past. Trump does not take a hostile position toward Russia in ways that Joe Biden did. And I think he's pressuring Russia so much just because he really wants Russia to buy into his peace deal. And if he gets that, I think you'll see a much friendlier approach from the Trump administration to Russia, which could actually bode well for the India-Russia relationship and the U.S.-India relationship.
Right. Michael, I want to ask you this since you're a keen observer of South Asian politics. Given the recent clashes between Pakistan and India, it seemed that it left India on the backstage for a while in regards of foreign policy. Do you think India wants to regain that momentum, capitalizing on its economy, and how successful do you think it can be?
Yeah, I mean, yes. And I think the most important thing for India is that it lost the global narrative war with Pakistan. It did not get buy-in and support from the international community throughout the conflict. It didn't get the international community to agree to India's position that it was waging these actions as part of a counterterrorism imperative. It did not get that, except from a very small number of countries that did give that support. Israel was one of the few. But I think that India has pivoted. I mean, it was facing challenges in its neighborhood well before the conflict with Pakistan, such as the major political changes in Bangladesh, as well as the arrival in power of several leaders around South Asia that have taken a more pro-China position than their predecessors. If you look at the Maldives and Sri Lanka, and those things have changed in Nepal recently, Nepal as well. But I think that India is in a fairly good place. I mean, one of the biggest challenges for India, one might have thought, would be Afghanistan, and it has a pretty good situation with Afghanistan. It's been able to ensure its relations are stable with those countries that I mentioned before, Maldives, Sri Lanka, Nepal. Bhutan, they're quite strong. Pakistan is a whole different story. And if you look further afield, India's relations with the U.S. are obviously in a deep crisis. Again, that's something that predated the crisis, the India-Pakistan conflict. But I would argue that on the whole, India's foreign relations, its diplomatic relations, haven't changed. They remain strong. They're important relationships with Russia, with its partners in the Middle East and the Gulf. Those remain strong. Its Western partners, France. the EU as well. It's going to be getting a trade deal with the EU by in the coming weeks probably. So I think that India has been able to bounce back, but I think that the impacts of Operation Sindoor and the conflict with Pakistan linger because I think it feels that it really could have done better. It should have done better in terms of the support that it got. It felt to be a very critical moment for its foreign policy.
Right, Michael, let's get back to Pakistan and US relations. US has been one of the biggest investors into Pakistan. A whole lot of chunk of our foreign direct investment comes from the US. Recently, the US embassy in Pakistan, they announced investment into Rikadik project in Balochistan, and they also announced jobs for Pakistani citizens. Do you see any enhancement in this investment opportunities, US businesses coming out in Pakistan in the avenues of cryptocurrency, minerals, and security domain?
Yeah, I mean, you've identified what the Trump administration used to as the key priorities for its relationship with Pakistan: critical minerals, crypto, as well as energy to an extent, and counterterrorism, which is sort of a separate issue. These areas, crypto, critical minerals, energy, these are areas that the administration wants to focus on in its relations with the world on the whole, not just with Pakistan. And I've argued on a number of occasions that Pakistan has been very effective at essentially positioning itself as a country that can partner with the U.S. on these issues. I do think there's a lot of question marks associated with all of this, and as you say, the U.S. Embassy has announced an investment in Balochistan, which would create jobs, which is terrific if that happens. But I think that there's significant levels of risk when it comes to investing in Reko Diq and more broadly investing in the mining sector in Balochistan, given the very troubled security situation. The U.S. embassy in Pakistan is very actively looking to get the interest of private American companies to come in and invest. So there's definitely the intent. It's about all about conducting commercial diplomacy. I mean, this is a term that you hear quite frequently now. That's the goal of this administration. But again, a lot of questions associated with that. Counterterrorism is indeed important, and I would argue, when I'm asked, well, what was it that prompted the Trump administration to decide to look to have a good relationship with Pakistan? It was the joint operation that targeted the Islamic State Khorasan fighter early in the Trump administration. That was something that really got the attention of the U.S. in a positive way, and I think President Trump, at that point, concluded that Pakistan could be helpful to the U.S. in helping track down terrorists that have targeted or threatened Americans. So that's important, but I wouldn't overstate how much counterterrorism cooperation has been. There has been some. And I would argue that when it comes to substantive collaborations, counterterrorism is one of the few areas where you actually have had something. There have been a few MOUs concluded on the critical mineral side, but not much going on. But you do have a counterterrorism dialogue between the U.S. and Pakistan. They cooperated on that earlier operation that I mentioned. So there is something there, but I think that we now know that the U.S. has pushed for a significant security aid package that would go towards the refurbishment of the F-16 fleet as well as defense technology. Pretty significant. That's for counterterrorism, as I understand it. That's meant to strengthen Pakistan's capacity as a counterterrorism player in ways that could help advance U.S. interests as well. But despite all that, the U.S. at the end of the day, when it thinks about counterterrorism priorities in Pakistan and the region, it thinks about ISK. It doesn't think as much about TTP, which at least at this point has not been targeting U.S. interests. It used to in a previous era, but not now. I don't think we're going to see the U.S. start sending significant amounts of weapons and security assistance as we did in the past, even though this most recent deal is important. But again, I think that's narrowly focused on counterterrorism, on the F-16 refurbishment. So bottom line is a lot of engagement, a lot of high-level engagement, a lot of talk on both sides about wanting to do things together, but a lot of question marks, I think, that could make it difficult for them actually to collaborate on substantive levels. And I think for the relationship to truly flourish, they might want to identify separate pillars that would be less filled with questions.
Right. Michael, my last question to you is from time to time, we see US congressmen put resolutions out against Field Marshal Asim Munir. banning him from foreign travel and put sanctions on him. Do you think, given the warmth in relation between Trump and Field Marshal here, is there any impact of those resolutions on Pakistan's military chief?
You saved the trickiest question for last. No, in terms of the question about actions on Capitol Hill, I think that this is significant and perhaps problematic for reputational reasons for Pakistan and particularly the military, given that you do have several statements, resolutions that are highly critical of Pakistan's military and are calling for punitive actions against it. But yeah, I mean, Congress does not make policy. It issues legislation. It does not make policy. It makes decisions about, assistance, that type of thing, but it does not make policies toward countries. That's what the executive branch does. So, just because you have this legislation calling for the Pakistani military to be sanctioned or whatever, that does not mean that it's going to happen. And I do think that given the nature of the relationship between the two, and given that the White House has taken this very positive position for now, and given that the White House has really been driving the policy toward Pakistan, I don't think that we're going to see much effect that these actions in Capitol Hill will have on. They're not going to have much impact on U.S. policy. And yes, I mean a number of Republicans, including Trump, Republicans close to Trump, have signed on to some of this legislation. But I think we've seen a pattern that even those in the Capitol Hill that are pro-Trump, that are Republicans, they're very careful. They don't try to push him and his White House to do certain things because this sort of the political moment in Washington now. You have to be careful what you do for fear of arousing the ire of the White House. So I don't think we're going to see much impact there.
Michael, thank you so much for your time. Always a pleasure having you. So, viewers, this is all for today. See you next time. Allah Hafiz.